Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Uh, Sorry for the video yesterday. Hopefully, that was okay going back into my classroom a little bit. But for some reason, I had this entire week recorded from last year, and I figured that was a good way to just bring that one in. Um, this content, it's really essential, but simply hearing me talk is not enough. So there are a lot of these video clips that you totally have to see, and I have a handful attached today. So I'll just provide a bit of an overview, and you can dig into the videos and see this stuff in like live recorded footage because that made a huge impact on the civil rights movement. So if I were to recap yesterday, you guys saw that there is like slow and painful progress. Just kind of think how long the Montgomery bus boycott went on. Over a year. Finally, there is progress, but significant white backlash on every single element of that progress. Uh, if you were to look at that notable court case, Brown versus Board of Education, while significant victory, but remember the wording of the court, all deliberate speed, and that Southern manifesto of white Southerners vowing to defy the court ruling, which they do so until the early 1970s. So just kind of think slow, painful progress and significant white backlash. That'll be continuation onto today's content, but again, you need to see the video clips. I do have about 5 or 6 different scattered ones in there. Some of which are songs. I have "Sweet Home Alabama" for you in there today, but I want you to understand the civil rights context of that. So please watch the video clips. I'll give you the overview. Here we go. Little Rock. We're in 1957 in Arkansas. Little Rock had a court order to integrate Little Rock Central High School. So let's just kind of understand they're ordered by the courts to integrate Little Rock Central, but the governor, Orville Faubus, he's about to run for re-election and wanted to appeal to the racists who he needed their vote. He decided to block this court order and simply ignore it. So he orders the National Guard. These are like the state troops. He calls them up, surrounds the high school, does not allow these kids in. Well, this is when the president is finally going to respond. We're in 1957. Ask yourself, people, do you know who the president is? Oh, it's Eisenhower. Eisenhower, a Republican, up to this point was silent on civil rights. He was, just kind of passively commenting, oh, yeah, you can't change people's minds. It'll eventually happen in time. But he never really did anything with civil rights until now. Uh, I would say, though, that his motivation is not necessarily progress in terms of civil rights. Eisenhower responds because he sees a state defying a federal order. Eisenhower's a military man. You don't defy a military man. That's insubordination. Bad things happen in the military if you do it. So Eisenhower now calls in the federal troops, and he's going to escort these 9 kids into Little Rock Central High School. Well, check out what these kids are going through as they're being escorted into the school. You have mass white Southern protests, Confederate flag flying. Look at the anger on the faces of these people. Race mixing is communism. Stop the race mixing. And these kids are going to be tormented physically, emotionally throughout their tenure at Little Rock Central. So just kind of understand that Eisenhower sends in the troops. And not just the troops, by the way, the 101st Airborne. These are the heroes of World War II. If you're familiar with Band of Brothers, that's the 101st Airborne, the guys that drop behind enemy lines. So Eisenhower is sending a message here. Front page of Time magazine, books written about this. And once Eisenhower sends in these troops, is it like, ooh, hey, now we're happy in Little Rock forever and ever? Oh no, there's white backlash here as well. So again, think of the physical, verbal, emotional abuse. Um, One kid was attacked with acid. They tried to throw acid in one of the black students' eyes. Another one of the black students was trapped in a bathroom and they tried to light her on fire. So we're talking like extreme violence here with the integration of just one public school in Arkansas. Eventually, it's a 2-year court battle. It is drawn out, but we kind of need to backtrack on this whole happy ending deal. Uh, 1996, you get a little bit of reconciliation through, believe it or not, the Oprah Winfrey Show. I'll give you guys that Oprah clip. It's one of the many I have today, and you'll kind of see the white perpetrators apologizing a little bit for their racist actions in 1957. So watch that one. It's good. You know, Oprah does her thing, eventually gets everyone to hug it out in the end. So watch that one. This is Eisenhower's response. So if we're talking presidents up to this point, of these three, who's doing the most? Roosevelt, does he do a lot with civil rights? Truman? Eisenhower? Roosevelt doesn't really win. His wife would have, but again, she's not able to get things through Congress. If you look at FDR, the one thing he did was that Fair Employment Practice Commission. Okay, it's something. But Mrs. Roosevelt, again, she was very progressive, always encouraging her husband, but her husband is the master politician who doesn't want to upset his political alliance in the South, so he was generally passive on civil rights. Truman, he is progressive. He integrates the military, but when Truman, a Democrat, goes progressive on civil rights, what happened to the Southern Democrats in 1948? They left, they formed the Dixiecrats, they formed their own political party in that election. Eisenhower, he wins in 52, doesn't do anything civil rights. It's 57, he doesn't do much until Little Rock. So of these three, who's doing the most? Truman. Who's going to be after Eisenhower? Because this guy's going to do more than these three combined. So let's just kind of work our way through these presidents. Again, one of your closing questions has all the presidents in a column. You don't have too much to write for these three. A lot of the progress will come in the 1960s with Kennedy and his, VP who takes over, Lyndon Johnson. All right, this is kind of an ongoing thing. Again, these still pictures, they do kind of tell the story, but you really need to see it in video. The sit-in movement, basically restaurants would be segregated and they would not allow African Americans to eat there. They would have to, go to the back and get their food, or they would be charged for a plate because they would say they could never reuse it after a black person ate off it. So messed up stuff, obviously, and you get a coordinated effort of both black and white students trying to integrate these lunch counters. So mass movement, protests outside. It does eventually work, but it's, again, kind of slow and painful progress here, as you can see. All right, nonviolent passive resistance. I think you're somewhat familiar with this tactic from world history. Think Gandhi. But anyway, it is effective, and I would argue that it's so effective now in the 1950s and 1960s because of one thing: television. Think about this. You now see it on TV. You see police brutality against unarmed young women, sometimes children. Uh, it might, tear at your heart a little bit. It might take you from the sidelines thinking, whoa, these people aren't doing anything wrong. Wait till you see the videos that I'm going to show you with the attached clips today. But this will be especially effective now that everything is televised. So just understand the impact of TV in the civil rights movement. That will provoke people to change, without a doubt. Freedom rides. This is another major movement of the civil rights where they're trying to integrate state to state busing. So you get, black and white kids riding on like a Greyhound bus going across state lines. Once they, stop at one of the terminals, they're oftentimes greeted by the Klan, greeted by violence. Sometimes they're arrested for like a made up thing like, "Ooh, you're disturbing the peace." But the freedom rides, when they're greeted by the Klan, they're greeted with clubs and bats, and some are even firebombed. This is one of the things that is televised in news reports, and this is what they say motivates John F. Kennedy to get off the sidelines and get very progressive with civil rights. You guys remember I was saying that Kennedy's campaign, he said, "Oh, I can wipe out discrimination with a stroke of a pen." And then he never did anything because he didn't want to upset those Southern Democrats. Well, someone JFK knew was actually on one of these buses. He saw it on TV, and now he's going to start acting. He's going to get very progressive on civil rights in response to the violence from these, Klan members firebombing the buses. JFK orders the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, to be integrated. James Meredith is the first black student here. Of course, when one student goes to Ole Miss, the entire college campus breaks out into riots. So Kennedy then sends 500 federal marshals to escort James Meredith. You can see the troops are sent to protect him. It's progress. It's a message by the president. The president is now going to act, but the South, being the South, is not really going to take it lightly. So you see more and more protests with every single one of these things, but Kennedy, the federal government, is now clearly responding. So this is, let's see, 1961. Are you going through your timeline with Kennedy? Because he is going to get a little bit distracted here with the Cold War. Yeah, you've got Cuban Missile Crisis, the fight with the communists. And then as JFK is doing more and more and more with civil rights, what happens by 1963? Oh, he's assassinated. And who takes over after John F. Kennedy? A white Southern Democrat from Texas. And people are thinking, oh no, everything that Kennedy did is now going to be reversed. Lyndon Johnson will prove them wrong, as you're about to see. So anyway, Kennedy, he's getting things done. He is committing. This whole James Meredith integration of Ole Miss definitely shows that the federal government is going to respond. There is still extreme violence in Birmingham. Birmingham's nickname, by the way, was Bommingham. This is Alabama, and they have a notoriously violent, horrible police chief who, practices police brutality with dogs and fire hoses and will attack the nonviolent protesters. I've got a video clip that will show it to you. It does much more than these still images as you see people, peacefully walking and they're going to be beaten by the police. So understand that Martin Luther King, he's protesting to try to call integration in Birmingham. He is arrested and writes his famed letter from a Birmingham jail. I've had to read this like 3 separate times in college classes. I'm sure you'll have to read it at some point, write some essays on civil disobedience. It's worth reading if you have all sorts of time right now and you want to read that. Anyway, you'll see the video clips momentarily. Lots of violence. A lot of kids are even going to be targeted here. They would say the fire hoses could like rip the skin off your back. So clearly bad. This is another terrible part of it, by the way, the whole bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. I've got just a quick 2-minute clip on that, but it was during a children's service and the Klan firebombed it. They didn't get the guys until like the 1990s who, did that horrible act of violence. But you'll see another quick 2-minute clip on the 16th Street Baptist Church. So something memorable. It is, of course, in Birmingham, Alabama, Bommingham, clearly the case here. Who's the governor of Alabama during all of this? Oh, it's George Wallace. I've got a 1-minute video clip on George Wallace with his famed, I draw a line in the sand, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. You got to see it. But this is the governor of Alabama saying segregation forever. Sure enough, when Lyndon Johnson is going to get very progressive with civil rights, he's going to run for president and he carries the entire Deep South. So just it's totally showing you the old Southern states writers who want to keep segregation, and he's campaigning on being a super racist, and people in the South follow that. Here he is blocking the doorway of another integrated or court-ordered integrated school. Wallace is not going to allow it to happen. If you guys have ever seen Forrest Gump, I think they had Forrest Gump like kind of on the sidelines here. I know some of you commented on that, but that's the famed scene from Forrest Gump. Another good movie you could watch during this quarantine, perhaps. Anyway, progress is happening. Kennedy, however, is going to be assassinated, and this huge civil rights bill is going to kind of stall in Congress, where the Southern Democrats don't want to pass it. So Martin Luther King is going to call for a big march on Washington, where he delivers what could be his most famous speech ever, the I Have a Dream speech. So it's delivered here trying to push Congress to pass some kind of civil rights legislation. I have a 4-minute clip of the "I Have a Dream" speech, which you may have heard. Uh, it's worth kind of hearing again, just for context here. But he's trying to get Congress to pass civil rights legislation. So you'll hear it, 4 quick minutes. There it is. Does Congress pass anything? That's the big question. The answer is yes. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if you think your way through this, it's the most comprehensive civil rights law ever. Uh, let's see, when were the last civil rights acts passed? Backtrack, backtrack, backtrack. Oh, you're in the 1860s. So remember when like the Freedmen's Bureau was around? Remember the radical Republicans? That was the last time any like real civil rights stuff was actually passed. But now it's going to be passed. The president, a white Southern Democrat, is going to sign it into law, shake hands with Martin Luther King, and later he's going to have a huge one that gives African Americans a clear right to vote. That was, taken away and messed with those whole Jim Crow laws. So more on that in a bit. But the Civil Rights Act of 1964, let's just note that it's huge. Bans racial discrimination. It gives the federal government all sorts of power to end segregation in schools. It creates an equal opportunity commission and guards against sexual as well as racial discrimination. So this Civil Rights Act, it's huge, it's progressive, but do understand that it does not protect voting rights. So another one is going to have to be enacted as well. That's a good place for us to end it today. You do need to watch the video clips. I think you'll enjoy a lot of them, even though there is some disturbing violence. So let me know if you got questions or concerns. I'm here all day. Just shoot me an email, comment on this, and I'm here. Have a good day.